Deep in the heart of the alien market, strange lights flickered like distant stars. The air was heavy with smoke, spices, and the sounds of creatures from every corner of the galaxy. Some were tall with thin limbs, others had glowing eyes, and many spoke in languages that hummed and clicked. In the middle of this noisy place, there was a small cage. Inside that cage, a tiny alien girl named Nyla sat quietly. Her skin was soft green with light blue freckles that sparkled under the dim lights. Her eyes were big, round, and filled with fear. She had heard the rumors. Whispers passed from one caged creature to another. "Did you hear? A human is coming to the market every time someone mentioned human." All the creatures shivered. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy. Stories said they were giants, strong and cruel. Some believed humans ate smaller species, especially the weak ones. Nyla had never seen a human. But the stories were enough to make her tremble. She hugged her knees, her tiny body trying to disappear. She didn't want to be noticed. She didn't want to be chosen. Soon, the market grew quiet. A tall figure entered, covered in a dark cloak. The merchants watched carefully. Their eyes followed his every step. The figure pulled back his hood, revealing pale skin, sharp eyes, and messy black hair. It was a human. His name was Evan. Evan walked slowly. His boots thudding against the metal floor, he looked at each cage with a serious face. The creatures inside backed away, afraid of what he might do. But Evan didn't speak. He just observed. When he stopped in front of Nyla's cage, the air around her felt heavy. Nyla's heart pounded like a drum. She hid her face, trying not to meet his gaze. She thought, "This is it. I'm going to be eaten." But Evan didn't look hungry. He looked curious. He crouched down to Nyla's level. "What's this one?" he asked the merchant, pointing at her. The merchant laughed. A deep, ugly sound, that one. "She's nothing. Just a wild little thing. Can't even speak properly. She's no use to anyone," another merchant added. "Better eaten than kept. She'll only die anyway." Nyla's eyes filled with tears. She didn't want to die. She didn't want to be eaten. She wanted to run, but the cage was too strong. Evan frowned. He didn't like what he heard. He looked at Nyla again. Noticing how small and fragile she was, there was sadness in her eyes. The kind of sadness he knew well. Without thinking too long, he stood up and said, "I'll take her." The merchant stared in surprise. "Why would you want that useless thing?" one asked. But Evan had already pulled out a small bag of coins. He paid without another word. The merchant opened the cage. Nyla shrieked and curled into a corner. She thought the human was going to grab her roughly, but Evan didn't do that. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a soft cloth. Gently, he wrapped Nyla in it like a delicate treasure. She shook violently, too scared to fight. "Let's get you out of here," Evan whispered. He carried her carefully. Leaving the shocked merchants behind, the other creatures watched in silence. Some whispered, "Poor thing, she won't last long." Others said, "Strange human, why be gentle with food?" Evan walked back to his small ship at the edge of the market. The ship was old, but strong, like its owner. He placed Nyla on a soft chair inside. She stayed wrapped up, too terrified to move. Evan sat nearby, watching her with a calm expression. "I'm not going to eat you," he said softly, but Nyla didn't believe him. She had heard too many stories. She closed her eyes, hoping it would all end quickly. Evan sighed and stood up. He prepared a small meal. Setting it beside her, "I'm Evan," he said. "What's your name?" Nyla stayed silent, her body shaking. Evan didn't push. He just sat back and watched the stars outside the window. Hours passed, and Nyla slowly peeked from the cloth. The food smelled good. She was hungry, but fear kept her still. Evan had not hurt her, not even touched her roughly. Maybe the stories were wrong. Maybe this human was different, but her fear was too big to ignore. So she stayed quiet, watching him, waiting for the moment when the monster inside him would show. But that moment never came. The ship drifted through space, quiet and peaceful. And in that silence, the tiny alien girl wondered, what if this human is not a monster at all? Asterisk, the human did not eat her? That was the first surprise Nyla faced. Hours passed, then days, but the bite never came. Instead, Evan offered her food. Warm and soft. Still Nyla refused. She watched him from her corner like a frightened animal. Evan spoke to her sometimes, not loud or angry, just calm and steady. He would say things like, "You must be hungry," or "It's safe here." But Nyla didn't believe him. How could she? Everyone knew humans tricked before they attacked. One morning, she awoke to the sound of soft music. Evan was fixing a device on the ship. His hands moved with care, his face focused. Nyla watched quietly, wondering why a monster would listen. To gentle music? Why a giant would hum softly to himself? Then Evan said something that confused her. "I wish I had someone to talk to," he whispered to himself. That made Nyla's ears perk up. Wasn't she here? Wasn't she someone? For the first time she spoke, her voice tiny and cracked. "Why? Why didn't you eat me?" Her question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Evan looked up, surprised but smiling. "Because I don't eat people," he said simply. "I'm not that kind of human." Nyla blinked, unsure what he meant. "All humans eat us," she whispered. "Who told you that?" Evan asked, chuckling. "Everyone," she replied, her voice barely a breath. Evan stood and walked to a small storage box. He pulled out a shiny tool and showed it to her. "This is a screwdriver," he said. "It fixes things." Then he pointed to himself. "And I fix things too, not break them." Nyla stared at the tool, confused but curious. She didn't understand then why by me. She asked. Evan shrugged. "Because you looked sad." Nyla didn't know what to say. No one had ever cared if she was sad. He left the tool near her and returned to work. Nyla crawled slowly to it, touching the cool metal. It didn't hurt. It didn't bite. Neither did Evan. Days passed like this. Nyla watched, listened, and sometimes asked little questions. Evan answered them all with patience. He told her about Earth, about blue skies and green trees, about friends, food, and fun. Words Nyla barely understood. One evening, Evan cooked something sweet. The smell filled the ship. Nyla's stomach growled loudly. Evan laughed. "That's your stomach telling me you're hungry," Nyla blushed, hiding her face finally. Hunger won over fear. She stepped closer, tiny hands shaking. Evan handed her a small piece of the sweet bread. She sniffed it, poked it, then slowly took a bite. Her eyes widened. It was delicious, soft, and warm. She ate slowly, watching Evan carefully, but he just smiled, happy she was eating. After she finished, Nyla sat quietly. Evan broke the silence. "What's your name?" he asked again. She hesitated, then whispered, "Nyla." Evan smiled wider. "Nice to meet you, Nyla." It was the first time someone said her name kindly. Her heart felt strange, like it was growing bigger. She didn't feel like food anymore. She felt like someone from that day. Nyla didn't hide as much. She watched Evan fix things, asked questions. She even helped by handing him small tools. Her tiny fingers were perfect for spaces his big hands couldn't reach. Evan taught her words showed. Her stars from the ship's window. Nyla learned about planets, ships, and even jokes. Sometimes she laughed, a sound she forgot she could make. One night, while looking at the stars, Nyla asked, "Are all humans like you?" Evan shook his head. "No, not all. Some are bad, some are good, just like any species." Nyla nodded slowly. Understanding, maybe stories were not always true. Maybe monsters came in many forms. But Evan was no monster. Nyla was still scared. Sometimes, but now, she had a name, food, and a human who smiled instead of roared. And deep inside, something new was growing, a tiny spark of trust. And in the dark space between stars, a small alien girl and a lonely human started to build. Something rare, a friendship neither of them had ever known. Nyla had never touched a star, but now she touched the buttons that carried her through them. The ship hummed with life like a giant beast, breathing calmly. And for the first time, Nyla wasn't hiding. She still didn't trust Evan completely. But something inside her had changed. She wanted to understand him. She wanted to know why a creature so big, so strong could be gentle. One day while Evan worked under a control panel, His face smeared with grease. Nyla tiptoed closer. "Why are you always fixing things?" she asked. Evan chuckled, his voice echoing from under the floor. "Because if I don't, the ship will fall apart and we'll both float in space." Nyla's eyes grew wide. "Fall apart?" She squeaked. Evan laughed louder. "Don't worry, I'm good at this." Nyla sat nearby. Watching his hands work, she thought of her own hands. Small and nimble, maybe she could help teach me, she said suddenly. Evan slid out from under the panel, surprised. "Teach you?" "Fix things?" Nyla nodded quickly. "Yes, I want to learn," Evan smiled, wiping his hands on a rag. "All right, Nyla, lesson 1. This is a spanner." He placed it in her hands. It was heavy for her, but she held it tightly. Spanner. She repeated, feeling proud. From that day, Nyla learned about tools. Wires and screens. She was quick. Her tiny fingers perfect for reaching places Evan couldn't. Together, they fixed lights, engines, and doors. She felt useful, not just a burden. Evan gave her a tiny tool belt made from old cloth. Nyla wore it proudly like a badge of honor. She no longer felt like prey. She felt like a partner. One evening, while they rested, Nyla asked a question she had been holding inside Evan. "Why did you come to the market that day?" Evan looked at the stars through the window, his face turning serious. "I was looking for something," he whispered. "What?" Nyla tilted her head. Evan sighed. "I didn't know." "Until I found you." Nyla's cheeks warmed. No one had ever said anything like that to her. She didn't know what it meant, but it felt nice. Suddenly an alarm beeped loudly. Evan jumped up, checking the screens. His face turned pale. "What's wrong?" Nyla asked, worried. "We're being followed," Evan said grimly. "By who?" "Alien patrol, and they don't like humans traveling with natives like you." Fear returned to Nyla's heart. "Will they hurt us?" she asked. "They'll try," Evan said, strapping on his gear. "But I won't let them." Nyla's tiny hands clenched into fists. She didn't want to lose her new home, her strange human. She wanted to help. "I'll help you, Evan," she declared. He smiled, proud of her courage. "Then let's show them what a tiny mechanic and a stubborn human can do." Together, they prepared the ship, setting traps and tricks in the narrow hallways. Nyla crawled into vents, placing gadgets Evan designed. Her small size made her the perfect spy. She could hear the enemy approaching through her sharp ears. The ship shook as the patrol docked. Nyla hid, watching with wide eyes. The aliens were tall and armored. Weapons glowing in their hands, they searched the ship, looking for the human and his prisoner, but Evan was ready. With Nyla's help, doors locked suddenly, smoke-filled. The corridors and traps caught the patrol's legs. The intruders yelled in confusion. Nyla giggled from her hiding spot, proud of her work. When one patrol soldier almost found her, she threw a small shock device Evan had given her. The device zapped the soldier, making him fall with a loud thud. Nyla's heart raced with excitement and fear. She had never felt this brave before. Finally, the patrol retreated. Too frustrated and beaten to continue, Evan closed the doors. Sealing the ship, he found Nyla hiding in the vent, her eyes shining. "You did amazing," he said, lifting her. Gently, Nyla smiled wide. "I'm not scared anymore," she whispered. Evan chuckled. "Good, because we make a great team," as the ship sailed safely away. Nyla looked at the stars again. She wasn't just a tiny alien anymore. She was a fighter, a helper, and most importantly, she was no longer alone. In the heart of space, between danger and wonder, a tiny heart had grown brave. All because one human decided not to be a monster. The stars looked different after a battle. Nyla pressed her face against the cold window, watching them. Each star seemed like a small friend. Blinking just for her, she thought, "I never thought I'd survive a fight." Behind her, Evan was tending to a small wound on his arm. Blood didn't scare Nyla anymore, not when it came from someone she cared about. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly. Evan glanced at her and smiled. "Not much. I've had worse." Nyla hopped down from the chair and walked over. She pulled out the cloth from her little tool belt. "Let me help," she said bravely. Evan laughed gently. "You sure?" She nodded. "You help me. Now I help you." She wrapped his arm her hands careful but firm. When she finished, she looked up proudly. Evan admired her work. "Perfect," he said. "Best medic on the ship." Nyla smiled for real this time. A smile not born from relief but from happiness. She was more than just a passenger now. She was part of the crew, even if the crew was just two. Later that night, they sat in the cockpit together. Nyla asked, "Where will we go now?" Evan stared into the star map. "Anywhere but here," he said. "But where do you want to go, Nyla?" Nyla blinked, surprised that anyone asked what she wanted. She thought for a while. "I want to see water." "The big water you talked about?" "The sea," she whispered. Evan chuckled. "The sea, huh? That's far but not impossible." He pressed a few buttons, and the map changed, showing a planet of blue and green. "That's a water world." "Plenty of sea." Nyla's eyes sparkled. "It's beautiful. Then we'll go there," Evan promised. "A promise?" Nyla asked shyly. "A promise written in stars," Evan said with a grin suddenly. The ship's alert buzzed again. Nyla's heart jumped. More patrols. Evan checked the screens and shook his head. No, something else. Distress signal. Nyla tilted her head. "What's that?" "Someone's in trouble," Evan explained. Nyla's little fists clenched. "Can we help?" Evan smiled proudly. "You really are something, Nyla." "Yes, we can help." They changed course. Following the weak signal, the ship trembled slightly. As they approached, an old cargo vessel floating lifelessly, lights flickered, and the ship looked ready to fall apart. Evan put on his gear. "Stay here, Nyla." But she grabbed his hand. "No, I'm coming. I can help." Evan paused, then nodded. "Okay, but stay close." Nyla strapped on her tiny tool belt, feeling like a real mechanic. Together they boarded the cargo ship. Inside, it was dark and cold. They heard soft cries. They followed the sound and found a small, alien child trembling and alone. Nyla stepped forward. "It's okay. We're here to help," she said gently. The child looked at her with wide, frightened eyes. Nyla understood that fear. She remembered being the one shaking in a cage. She knelt down. "You're safe now," she whispered. Evan fixed the ship's power core, bringing back the lights. The cargo ship's systems flickered on, revealing more survivors hiding in corners. Nyla helped guide them, her small voice calming the frightened. By the time they returned to their ship, they had saved 5 lives back on their own ship. Nyla looked up at Evan. "We did good, right?" she asked. Evan smiled. "We did better than good. We made a difference that night." While the rescued aliens slept safely, Nyla sat by the window again. She whispered to the stars. "I was wrong about humans. Evan is not a monster. He's my friend, my family, and somewhere deep inside." Nyla made a promise to herself to never be afraid again, to grow braver, to help others just like she was helped. The stars twinkled back, as if agreeing, and as the ship floated forward, a tiny alien girl and her giant human friend carried their new promise, a promise written not just in stars, but in hearts. Trouble didn't always arrive with loud guns or angry shouts. Sometimes trouble smiled first. That's what Nyla learned the day another human ship appeared on the radar. Evan looked at the blinking light on his screen. "It's a human freighter." "Odd to see one this far," he muttered. Nyla tilted her head. "Is that good?" Evan hesitated, then smiled. "Could be. Humans are complicated." But Nyla felt a strange knot in her tiny stomach. She still remembered the old stories of humans. Not all of them were kind like Evan. When the freighter docked, a group of humans stepped aboard. Their leader was a tall woman named Captain Riva. She smiled wide, her eyes sharp like blades hidden behind kindness. "Been a long time since we saw another human friend," she greeted Evan. Evan shook her hand. Cautious, but polite. "Same here. What brings you out here?" "Trade exploration," Riva answered smoothly. Her eyes fell on Nyla, who stood partly behind Evan. "And what's this?" "A new pet," she asked with a grin. Evan's face hardened. "She's my mechanic, not a pet." Nyla's cheeks burned. She didn't like how Riva looked at her. Like she was a thing, not a person. Riva laughed. "Cute." "She's got a tool belt and everything," but Nyla noticed something. The other humans behind Riva carried weapons, not openly, but hidden. Their eyes scanned the ship, counting, measuring. She whispered to Evan, "They're looking at everything like they want to take it." Evan nodded slightly, his smile fading. He knew that look too. Pirates disguised as traders. Riva's tone changed slightly. "You're lucky. Traveling alone is dangerous. How about we join forces?" "Safer that way," she offered. But Evan smiled coldly. "Thanks, but I prefer my own company." Riva's eyes narrowed. "Shame," she said, "because I wasn't asking at her signal." Her crew raised their hidden weapons. Nyla gasped. Stepping back, Evan pushed her behind him, his hand reaching for his sidearm. "You don't want to do this," Evan warned. Riva smirked. "I do, actually. Your ship's got upgrades I could use. I'm curious about that little alien. She might fetch a good price." Before she could give the next order, the ship shook. Lights flickered. Alarms blared. Nyla had triggered the emergency traps she and Evan had prepared days ago. Hidden panels slammed shut, separating the intruders. Gas hissed from vents, making them cough and stumble. Nyla darted through the vents like a shadow, she remembered. Every path, every trick, Evan taught her. She reached the power core and flipped a special switch. The ship's internal defenses activated fully. Shocking floors, locking doors, Evan fought back, punching and dodging. He wasn't just a mechanic. He was a fighter too. He took down 2 attackers with precise hits. Meanwhile, Nyla set off another trap. Releasing blinding lights and noise, the invaders were confused, disoriented. Finally, Evan cornered Riva. She was coughing, eyes burning. "You should have left." "When I said," Evan growled. Riva spat on the floor. "You and that freak of yours." "You'll regret this." Evan hit a button, opening an airlock. "Goodbye," he said, and Riva and her remaining crew were ejected safely but forcefully into space. Back to their freighter, Evan sealed the ship and breathed heavily. Nyla climbed out of the vent, her face dirty but proud. "We did it," she said with a bright smile. Evan chuckled. "You're the best partner a guy could ask for." But deep inside, Evan knew the galaxy wasn't getting safer. More humans would come, some worse than Riva. He looked at Nyla, who was wiping grease from her hands. He couldn't let anything happen to her. That night, under the stars, Evan sat with Nyla. "We need to get stronger," he said. Nyla nodded. "I'll learn more, fix more. I'll get smarter." Evan smiled. "And I'll teach you everything I know. We'll be ready next time." Nyla looked at the stars. She wasn't scared of them anymore. But she was learning that danger could have a friendly face, and that only together could they survive whatever the galaxy threw at them. Their bond wasn't just friendship now. It was a promise of protection, a team built not by blood, but by choice, and the stars above, like silent witnesses, watched them prepare for whatever came next. The galaxy did not wait for anyone to rest, not even for a tiny alien girl and her human friend. Barely days after driving the pirates away, a storm found them. Not a storm of rain or wind, but a storm of space itself. Nyla had never seen anything like it. Colors twisted outside the ship window. Purple lightning cracked across the stars. Evan's face turned serious, his hands flying across the controls. "A gravity storm," he muttered. "Bad news. What does it do?" Nyla asked, clinging to her seat. "It bends space, crushes ships like paper." Evan replied grimly. Nyla swallowed hard. "Can we escape it?" "I'm trying," Evan said, sweat on his brow. The ship shook violently, alarms screaming, panels sparked, lights flickered. Nyla rushed to the engine room. She remembered Evan's lessons. She had to keep the power steady, or they'd be torn apart. Her small hands flew over switches and wires. She tightened bolts, reconnected power lines. Sparks burned her fingers, but she didn't stop. "I can do this," she whispered to herself. Meanwhile, Evan fought the controls, the storm's gravity, pulled at them, dragging the ship closer to the storm's heart. Come on, Evan growled. He believed in his ship, but more than that, he believed in Nyla. Suddenly, the engine roared back to life. Nyla had done it. Power is stable. She shouted over the comm. Evan smiled, pride glowing in his eyes. "That's my mechanic." He pushed the engines harder, guiding the ship through the storm. Lightning flashed. Rocks spun wildly in the storm winds. One large asteroid came too close. We can't dodge it, Evan warned. But Nyla had an idea. She rerouted extra power. To the shields, the ship glowed blue just as the asteroid struck. The shield held, barely, but it was enough. Together, they fought the storm. Evan's strength and skill, Nyla's speed and cleverness. Bit by bit, they pushed through until finally. The stars returned to their calm glow. The ship drifted into quiet space, battered but alive. Evan slumped back in his chair. Breathing hard, Nyla crawled into the cockpit, her face covered in soot. But smiling, we did it, she whispered. Evan chuckled. You're amazing, you know that? Nyla giggled. I'm just your mechanic. They both laughed, the sound of it chasing away the fear. But then, Nyla's smile faded slightly. What if you weren't here? What if I was alone? She asked softly. Evan looked at her, his face. Gentle, you'll never be alone, Nyla, he promised. As long as I'm breathing, I'll be here. Nyla's heart felt warm. She believed him, truly. She knew now that not all humans were monsters. At least not Evan, later, while repairing. The ship together, Evan said. You're not just my mechanic, Nyla. She tilted her head. Then what am I? My family, he said simply. Nyla's eyes watered. No one had ever called her family before. She wiped her eyes quickly. Family, she repeated, smiling wide. From that day, their bond was stronger than ever. They worked like two parts of the same machine, fixing, flying, surviving. Though the galaxy was still dangerous, Nyla wasn't scared of it anymore. Because family meant facing storms together. No matter how wild the winds above them, the stars continued to shine. Watching quietly as the tiny alien girl and the stubborn human flew on, together against whatever the universe dared to throw at them. In a corner of the galaxy, far from maps and warnings, stories began to spread, tales of a tiny alien girl and her human giant. Some said the human was her captor, others claimed he was her guardian, but the truth was stranger and softer than any rumor. Nyla sat on the ship's roof, staring at the endless stars. The wind of space, silent and cold, brushed past the glass. She smiled, not afraid of the dark anymore, because beside her, working on a scanner, was Evan, her giant, her family. Thinking of the sea again? Evan asked, without looking up. Nyla giggled. Maybe someday we'll see it, right? Evan nodded. A promise is a promise. They had been to many places since the storm. Planets with glowing forests, markets with honest traders, and even moons where gravity made them float like feathers. Everywhere they went, they helped someone. Fixing broken engines, guiding lost ships, protecting the weak. People started calling them the tiny protector and the gentle giant. Nyla liked that. She was no longer just the scared girl in a cage. She was someone brave, someone who had tamed a human heart, one day, while resting in a small spaceport. A young alien approached them. He looked nervous, eyes darting around. Are you the human and the tiny mechanic? He asked Evan and Nyla. Exchanged a glance. Depends, Evan replied. Who's asking? My village. We're in danger. We need help, the alien pleaded. Nyla stepped forward, her tool belt jingling. We'll help, she said confidently. Evan smiled. Proud of her, where to? The young alien led them to a distant world. The village was under threat from raiders, powerful and merciless. Nyla and Evan planned carefully. They used traps, clever tricks, and repaired the village defenses. When the raiders came, they were met with surprises at every corner, booby traps, fake paths, and shields powered by Nyla's genius. Evan fought with strength, Nyla with speed and mind, together. They turned the village into a fortress. The raiders fled, beaten and humiliated. After the battle, the villagers celebrated. They gave Nyla a necklace, shaped like a tiny gear, to the bravest heart in the smallest body. They said Nyla wore it proudly. She was no longer small in her own eyes. That night, by a fire under the alien sky, Nyla looked at Evan. Do you think I was born to be weak? She asked quietly. Evan shook his head. No, you were born to be strong. But strength isn't just muscles, it's here. He tapped her chest gently, in your heart. Nyla smiled, feeling that truth deep inside. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living in heaven. He wasn't lonely anymore, because the tiny girl he saved had saved him back. She gave him purpose, family, and laughter as their ship took off again, flying into another adventure. Nyla stood proudly at the front window. The stars looked less like cold lights and more like friends now, each one a promise of a new story, a new place, a new friend to help. And wherever they went, one thing was sure. The tiny alien girl who once feared humans had become the girl who tamed a giant. And the galaxy would never forget them.